Dr. Pete Economou. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. It's so good to be here, Anthony.
Yeah, that name sounds familiar to me. I don't know. Uh, where is it originally from?
Well, the origin of Economou is from Greece.
Okay. And where are you?
I'm in America. I'm just outside of New York right now. Actually, my office in Hoboken, New Jersey. But in any given day, I can be throughout the state of New Jersey.
Oh, wonderful. And I happen to be in Greece, in Athens, Greece.
Isn't that wonderful? Maybe that's why it
Yes,
sounds familiar.
that's right. It sounds familiar. Hey, Dr. Pete, it's a pleasure to meet you. And to whoever is watching, you're tuned in to Now Tell Us podcast. And I'm your host, Anthony Mwerore. It's a wonderful time that we are going to have here with our special guest today, Pete Economou, Dr. Pete Economou. And we're going to find out more as we keep going about who is Pete Economou and what he's here for. And today we're going to be dealing with mental health and mindfulness. Please, before we go into the episode fully, I request you that you share this episode with all your friends. If you have a question, ask. If you have any comment to make on this podcast, we really love feedback, so we appreciate you in advance. And now, why don't you stay there? Get your pen and paper because I know you're going to make some notes and sit back with a cup of coffee as we officially go into the show. This is Now Tell Us. Here we go. Wow, wow, wow. I'm honored to meet with you, Dr. Pete. Such a pleasure. What's happening there in the US at the moment?
Well, that's a loaded question in today's world in 2024. But in the moment, we are a day before the anniversary of 9/11, actually. So as we're recording this and we're live, and so for the U.S., it's a day that is really somber, and it was 23 years ago that we had thousands of lives lost, and also then a presidential election kind of after that, and so I think the next couple months are certainly challenging in the United States. And so maybe this is the perfect opportunity to talk about mental health and mindfulness.
Yeah, it's such a good time to bring this topic into discussion because I know there are people who are going through a lot of things and due to everything that is happening around them. And if we have this conversation, is going to be helpful to someone. So before we really go deep into this, can we know who exactly is Dr. Pete?
Yeah, I'm a psychologist. I'm a professor. I'm a humanitarian, a family person, an animal lover. I'm a lot of things. But in the world, that we're going to talk about today, as a psychologist, there's somebody who's licensed and practices professional psychology, and so the treatment of symptoms and diagnoses around mental health. I work primarily with high performers in the world of sports and business. And so that means kind of helping people achieve their optimal performance, which is a really kind of a blessing and a beautiful thing that I'm privileged to be able to do. And the professor piece is just to be able to like bridge the gap, kind of this research that's done that people read about, and how do we put that into application. And so I think for me, that's why, Anthony, thanks for having me on the show. It's how much more can we get out to the public and to disseminate the information that we have rather than kind of operating in vacuums. I think the world is sort of used to that. People just sort of go to conferences and see the same people every year. But how do we kind of branch out to get our messaging out so that we can potentially have greater impact on this larger population?
Mm. And I'm curious to know, how long have you been in the US? Were you born there or did you move there from Greece?
Yeah, thanks. Born and raised, and so I'm second generation. You know, both of my parents were also born in the United States, and so I'm born of a Greek Italian father and an Irish mother. But my last name is very Greek, as you say, from Athens. And I like to say to people here in the U.S., because growing up, people were like, "This is such a weird last name," but it is like Smith over in Greece. It could be it's a very common last name. So I identify as a Greek American. That's my predominant ethnic identities, and I think for me, culture is critical. I love cross cultural experiences and multicultural conversations.
Yeah, and as we, whatever it is that we are in the world, I mean, because this show you get listened to from all people, from all corners of the world by all kinds of people. And we know there is, as just you introduced the show, there is so much that happens in the US. We see it in the news. There's that 9/11. There's always the movements,
Yeah.
BLM, and all kinds of other movements. So we we sure know. And then, like, the current situation with the politics that has been there before, it's something that is being repeated. And we know that people during this all these kind of things, people could go through a lot of tough times, and they've got a way
Yeah.
to deal with them. And this is why we have you here. What drove you into that direction? Is What drove you into that direction?
It's an interesting question. I was I guess many psychologists will say there have always sort of been a introspective and supportive kind of person, and I would say that that's how I will be described. I think the people around me that know me and that are close to me understand that I like the human experience. I've kind of been the person that is within my family. Sometimes they even call me like Switzerland. Like the person that kind of helps navigate these difficult conversations. And so I think, that's a lot of what sort of brought me into this. I didn't know that I wanted to go into this. I don't have any, psychologists in the family. My dad did study psychology, but he never practiced it, and he just did it at the undergrad level. So no one kind of advanced to the level of training that I had to go, to earn a PhD. Um, and so I didn't know that I wanted to do this, but I think just kind of working in the world and sort of seeing suffering and I was like, well, it's got to be something better, like how do we kind of eliminate some suffering and just like live in a kind of more effective, um, fulfilling way. And so that led me to stay in the US and study. I had thought about, I traveled abroad and was thinking about considering living in Europe at one point, and um, rather than do that, I decided to stay and kind of seek this additional graduate training. And so I never left, to go live anywhere again. I used to enjoy traveling and sort of see different cultures, but that shifts too. Values kind of change. They
Mhm.
come and go. And so in this moment, my value is one that's about just helping people.
Hmm. Any close contact with people who could be needing this help that we are talking about today, or maybe some personal experiences as you are growing up, that that may have impacted you in a way that you could not maybe imagine, and that's why maybe you were influenced into going this direction.
Well, in the world of academia, where we do research, sometimes they call it me search. Some researchers are doing studies on themselves or something that's happened to them. That's called me search. I'm kind of an anomaly in that way. Like I pretty much have like a very sort of privileged, mostly boring kind of upbringing. I mean, there were moments of trauma, a cracked skull at a young age, stitches and broken arms and bones and um, parental divorce. My parents are divorced. Things have certainly happened from birth till today. I don't know any life who has not. I don't know, Anthony. Are you aware of anyone who has not had any of that kind of trauma, sort of suffering moments in their life?
Everyone has something, has gone through something, maybe is even going
Yeah,
through something as we speak.
that's exactly right. So
Mm,
there's no moment where I was like, oh, this is the thing that led to it. No, because I think I would have maybe chosen it earlier.
mhm,
I actually studied biology undergrad, and then I started studying neuroscience at the graduate level, and I was modeling, and I was, working in New York, in this kind of like high paced, really high exciting world. But I was still trying to find myself because that's what we're all trying to do. We're all
mm,
trying to find what it is that we want to do. In our literature, we call it a vocation. What's your calling?
mhm.
And I think I found my calling, but hey, maybe there's something else, that I'm going to do in a couple more years that I don't know yet.
And I'm happy that you found yourself. I'm actually seeing some of your accomplishment, and I'm like, wow. Uh, did I see you in Wikipedia? Is that you?
Yes, yes, yes,
How did you
yes,
even get there? And people say, okay, so if you want to search for Dr. Pete Economou, he's found on Wikipedia. How's that?
yes.
Yeah, it's not an easy. So there are accomplishments. You've done some researches. You've done quite a lot of things. And
Mhm.
then I also came across a book that you've written that is known as
Yes,
Mindfulness Workbook for Beginners.
yes,
Exercises and meditations to relieve stress, find joy, and cultivate gratitude.
yes.
Wow. Congratulations, Dr. Pitt.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And we
I
are
love the graph. I love the graphic. Thank you for that.
yeah, and we are happy that you found your vocation
Yeah,
and you're shining in it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so is that the only book that you've written, or you've written some others that we can know of?
I did it. I wrote another book actually. So that was all during COVID. So the book you just put up there was the first like just general mindfulness book. There's a lot of mindfulness stuff out there. When I first started this practice about 15, 20 years ago, people didn't really know what mindfulness was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, from then until today, now everyone has heard the word. And there was lots of books like mindfulness for eating disorders or mindfulness for anxiety, like specific sort of issues. My book is very general, so it's not tailored toward any like specific thing that someone's trying to grow. It's just how do I more globally kind of integrate mindfulness into my life, everyday
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did write another book, which was the Meditation Journal for Anxiety. So the same publisher was interested in kind of putting something else out more specific to anxiety about like how do I meditate on this? How do I maybe use meditation as an avenue to reduce some symptoms of anxiety? So in that same year, 2021, I published the second book. So I
Wonderful.
was busy. I was busy during COVID.
Wonderful. And it's good to hear that, because I know, uh, just as we are talking about going through issues, so many people went through a lot during COVID, and
Yeah.
so many people also came out with beautiful things like books. And we are glad that
Yes.
you are busy and you came out with something positive. So, here, talking about mental health and mindfulness, and I know there are tips, ideas, insights that you would like to share with us. Can you maybe have this time and just pour it out to us?
Yeah. I mean, you know, mental health is health, so I think again 15, 20 years ago it was very separate. It was like, oh, you have to be on this way, you have to be that way. Mental health is health, and so your physical health is part of your mental health, your spiritual health is part of your mental health. All of it's connected. And so I don't want listeners to think that mental health is just a diagnosis or just suffering. Mental health can also be mental health could also be positive. It could be accomplishment. It could be mindset. It could be mental resilience. So these are all kind of part of mental health. And so I just want the tips for me are like think about all these buckets that kind of make up who you are. Like lots of different buckets. You just want to make sure that they're like as full as possible. Not overflowing and not empty, but just keeping them like healthily full.
Hmm.
Not every bucket's going to be like to the top, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
As long as maybe it's like halfway or a little bit over halfway. Sort of think about ways that you can get all these sort of buckets in that way. And the buckets could be things like your social life, your romantic life, your intellectual or employment life, career, your family life, the environment. all these sort of things that are around us. This
Mhm.
experience of life is rich, and so trying to really like lean in and commit to life in a way um, that's nourishing and fulfilling.
Mhm. Yes, and then we talk about mindfulness, and for someone who maybe be hearing his very first time about mindfulness, what's that to do with this, and how do they connect with mental health?
Mindfulness is just maybe one way that the buckets kind of stay full. It's mindfulness from John Kabat-Zinn is on purpose in the present moment and without judgment. So the
Mm,
world that we live in, we're usually tortured by something from the past or worry about the future. So can I just be in the present moment? Whatever I do on purpose. So have intention. Like sometimes we just go through the motions. I wake up, I brush my teeth, I go to work, I come home, I feed the babies, I go back, watch TV and go to bed and repeat. What am I doing but do that with intention, when you're feeding the babies, feed the babies. Think about the food, think about your frustration that you might have because they're not eating what you want them to eat. That's that you do that in like on purpose and then without judgment. So
mhm,
when you get frustrated or when kind of feel like things are not exactly how you want them to be, experience that without judgment. And so that's one of the hardest things to do, actually,
mhm,
because the brain judges. That's what it's meant to do. It's what keeps us alive. The brain is meant to judge. And so you want to train it, though, to try and live in a more non judgmental way. So
mm,
rather than this is the best podcast episode I've ever listened to, or this is the worst podcast episode I've ever listened to, I'm
mhm,
listening to a podcast interview. You know,
mm.
experiencing things without judgment allows for you to experience things more fully. People think that they'll take away joy or things of that nature. It actually allows for you to experience it in a more kind of profound way.
Hmm. And now, since things are able to influence me in one direction or the other, and bad things happen, and I see this is a bad thing, and I just have to accept and just uh,
That's right.
convince myself that this is a bad thing or this is a good thing. So, how do I call that balance? How do I maintain that balance? How do I be mindful? How do I achieve that,
Yeah.
according to you?
Well, I love that you use the word balance because we kind of use that metaphor of a scale. In the world of mindfulness, we call it the middle path. A lot of mindfulness stuff is borrowed from the East, so it is sort of these Eastern spiritual practices like Buddhism or things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so middle path is borrowed from that, which says really, suffering is created in all or nothing. If you're looking at things as black and white, you're likely suffering.
Mm-hmm.
How do I find the gray in that experience? And that is what we talk about middle path or balance, like you so eloquently said.
Okay. And in your book, in chapter number 5, you talk about spending time with your thoughts and feelings.
Hmm.
How do we go about that?
Well, most of us, and what I see is a lot of people, and I don't know, Anthony, you tell me if this is your experience or people but a lot of people, they get home, they turn the TV on, or they turn the radio on, or they get in the car, the radio's already on. We're usually surrounded by a lot of noise.
Mm-hmm.
I watch, kids these days, almost all of them have headphones in, and they're listening to something. So when I say about spend some time with your thoughts and feelings, that means like doing nothing. It could be meditating. Obviously, as you meditate, you're like forced to sit with what is in front of you, right? And that what's in front of us is not always pleasant. Sometimes we want to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's what I talk about with that. It's like, how do I, with intention and without judgment and in the present moment, just experience my thoughts and my feelings? And so, like, if I'm in traffic, what kind of thoughts do I have sitting in traffic, especially if I'm late somewhere? The thoughts are very negative. They're, um, how dare I? I should have left earlier. This road is so stupid. Where are all these people going? They should be working. All these kind of thoughts pop into people's heads. Um, just notice those thoughts. In traffic when you're about to, you know, feel really frustrated, shut the radio off. You know, maybe roll in the windows and listen. What do you hear? Like, is there maybe you hear a bird chirping in the background, or maybe you hear a plane taking off, or just kind of bring yourself into that moment. And then notice that your thoughts are there that are like trying to, they're trying to hijack you almost. They're trying to hijack you into this like irate, angry kind of state, and see if you can just, observe that sort of tug of war. But the reality of it is, if you're playing tug of war, you're just playing with yourself.
Hmm. And I've met with people who say that, and this is in many areas of life, in many areas of what it is they are doing, and they say that it's easier said than done. Now, when you
Mhm.
when you talk about just getting into my thoughts and thinking in a positive, how do you easily achieve that? Because again, we know that situations could be overwhelming. How do you have, maybe I'm trying to imagine to myself, do you have maybe like hooks, like things we call anchors? I mean, are there tools that you can suggest for to people that they can use to just stay there, be focused, be mindful?
Yeah. I mean, anchors are great. I love that you just kind of put that out there. That could be something. An anchor could be a mantra, perhaps. Maybe somebody has a prayer or a mantra. This does not have to be religious. It could also be a word. It could be like, kiwi. It could be anything you want it to be. That could be your anchor. You said easily. Uh, it's not easy. So I
Hmm.
think just eliminate, like delete that. This is also suffering. Like this is a struggle. If it were easy, I think we would all do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the practice of it's practice. It's just like anything else. If I want to lose weight, I don't just wake up the next day and I've lost weight. It takes time to sacrifice, eat a little healthier, maybe move a little bit more than I want to. Um, if I want to get a bigger bicep, I have to do multiple reps and kind of keep increasing my weight. There's things take time. And so
Mm-hmm.
we focus on process and not outcome. So am I committing to the process? That's one thing that people can do. How do I at least, each step, I will mess up. I'm going to mess up. Like
Mm.
that's inevitable. So embrace the mess up without judgment. And then you commit to the next step.
Wow,
Yeah.
I love that. There's nothing good that comes easy. I mean, because I would want you to promise me that once maybe I listen to your speech or your sharing, your interview, or maybe after I read my your book, everything is gonna fall into place just like that. And
Yeah.
I wake up a mindful person, and everything I'm seeing, I'm not judgmental. It's not easy.
If only that were the case. Look, I wish, if that's possible, I would want everyone to have that.
Hmm. Wow, wow. Whoa. So, to all the viewers who are watching us, and even if you are watching this as the recorded version, um, maybe we would want to know what struggles you've been through, or maybe any of the ideas that you've used to just be there in the present, be mindful. Are there anchors that you use that you can share with us, even as we keep going? And that would be good for you sharing with us. And thank you for that in advance. So, I know you, as you say, you work with people. How does that work out? I mean, how do you go about it? Working with people and the kind of people that you mentioned you work with. How do you go about it?
Yeah, I mean, so as a psychologist, there's a professional kind of engagement that we enter into, and so legally it's confidential. So I'm not allowed to even say people I know or work with or talk to or things of that nature. So that allows for that kind of that side of it. But I
Mm,
do have some people that just seek out just some mindfulness coaching. Um, so I guess I should say I haven't said this. I mean, I have all this academic training, which has allowed for me to understand sort of the science behind, behaviorism and learning theory. And then I have this other piece that was also I've been studying Buddhism for 15 years with, my teacher, and so I'm, a Dharma holder of his, and so having studied with him for 15 years. Um, and so that Zen kind of practice just helps to integrate and inform some of this. A lot of the Zen, which is not a religion. It's it's a philosophy and it's a way of life. So that's why it marries so nicely, with with mindfulness as a sort of like a non-secular practice. I think that's important for many people because sometimes, yeah, I've had students that, for example, if they're highly religious, they feel like this is sort of counterintuitive or like unallowed, not permitted in their practice. But this is not about religion or gods or anything of that nature. It's just about the kind of individual human experience. And so I think the human experience it's complicated. It's a real complicated thing. I will say, um, humans, we complicate it more than it needs to be. I will say that, and so
Mhm.
I think mindfulness does help to kind of simplify it a little bit. It's sort of a minimalistic approach to life, if you will.
Hmm. Wow, that's wonderful. Wow. So this is Dr. Pete Economou. You can, and how would people who want to connect with you find you, and so that you may
Yeah,
work together?
I appreciate that. I'm on most all the socials are official Dr. Pete. I do also have a podcast. It's on air with Dr. Pete, and we have also When East Meets West. And so the When East Meets West is this like idea of how do I bridge Eastern spiritual practices with Western behavioral science, because there's a lot of overlap. I think what's important is that like all this stuff is just like we're just where we are. Everyone's kind of going through life in the same sort of way, and it can be really challenging at times. And so understanding how to like bridge things together, I think that's we are communal beings. Suffering is universal. How do I bring ideas, people, communities together? And especially in a time when everything is like feeling like it's so pulled apart. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a little
yeah,
bit of like
yeah. People don't have to go through it alone. I mean,
that's right.
and because we said it's not easy, if you've been trying to just be there in the present and just coming back to yourself and maybe going after a vocation, struggling, meeting with challenges, then it's good to connect with someone who can help you along, who can hold your hand as you walk along.
That's
That's
exactly
Dr.
right.
Pete. That's Dr. Pete. So if you're listening, reach out to Dr. Pete Economou, and yeah, get to know about more about him. And by the way, you can find a link in the description then that can take you to a website where you can easily connect with him, and that would be great. Wow, wow. So let me know what's in the future for you, Dr. Pete.
Oh, if only I had that magic ball, Anthony. I think the tenet of mindfulness is to be in the present moment. So, letting go of the past and not worrying about the future. So, um, I do, so I don't give too much thought to that. However, I'm human, so in the present moment, you can plan for the future. But I think just really like kind of growing a little bit more. Both individually but also professionally, trying to kind of reach out like this. So thanks for having me on the show. I think just trying to broaden the audience. I think that's a really important thing in life. The one thing that professors and academics usually do is like very we don't disseminate information in a really productive way. I'll say. I think a lot of times we're sort of in this vacuum, as I mentioned at the beginning of our episode. And so I think I'm really committed to trying to get as much good information out there. So in the future, I'd like to continue to do that, try in ways of, podcasts and kind of continuing, there's some kind of local and syndicated television shows that I'm a part of, and sort of just, whether as a guest or something, just kind of getting on to like just share, some of these tips and tools and just ways that we can kind of end suffering, just one sort of thing at a time, one step, one day, one moment at a time.
Wow. And in chapter 8 of your book, you talk about practicing gratitude. What
Yeah.
things are you grateful for? And how do you usually, on a day to day basis, practice your gratitude?
Yeah, I mean, gratitude is free, and it's also limitless. I think love is limitless, and so that's a way that you can kind of practice gratitude. You could, and again, I understand some listeners will be in this dark cloud and they'll be like, "This guy's, what's he talking about? That sounds." But this is like daily sort of affirmations. I start every day with meditating. I end every day with meditating. Ways that during that time you just sort of slow things down, maybe reflect a little bit. Maybe you're working on some kind of, in the Zen world, we call it a koan, or maybe you're just praying while you're sitting. But gratitude is, like I said, it's limitless. You can have as much of it. So even being thankful for the person that just cut you off when you're driving, being thankful for the train, being delayed, or your flight being delayed. That's hard to do. I understand that, but there's something to be learned in everything that we're doing. And so if we could slow down and say, I got, for me, it's like an athlete that maybe is injured, they don't want to, no athlete wants to be injured, but how do I find gratitude? If I've just injured my ankle, if I'm 30 years old, my ankle has just carried me for 30 years, so in 30 years it got hurt once, um, to a point where you had to sit out for 6 months. That does suck, but you can't forget that there was 30 years of time that thing gave to you. That's gratitude, that you're
Mm.
just sort of acknowledging, and and having awareness that the frustration and the anger that you even have in the moment around the injury, that's okay. Like there's no right or wrong in this, but trying to find ways that you can say, all right, like this is just part of my experience. Like that's the process. Let me just kind of have some, some gratitude. Let me experience this with grace.
Wow. Uh, there are many people who don't look at it that way. I mean, you find yourself in a situation and all you can start doing is cursing
Yeah,
that moment. And now you bring the perspective where I have to focus on the good in everything that happens and appreciating, being grateful about it. It's a good
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Pete, for coming to our show. We really appreciate and everything that you've shared with us. And we wish you great success as you keep on being mindful of the present and looking forward to the future, being in the moment.
Thank, thank you for having me on, Anthony. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Before you go, leave us with something that we should always remember. What's that for Dr. Pete?
Well, the thing that came to my mind was just social media and phones, as you said that. Be sure that you're using them and they're not using you. I do see that in terms of mental health and mindfulness, social media and technology is pulling us away from that. It's a lot of research showing that the increased use of these devices is leading to depression and anxiety. And so stay bounded around that. Make sure you're using it, but that it's not using you.
Wow, that's a good one. Being in the moment, use the social media, the gadgets that are around you, but make sure they're not using you.
That's right.
Yes, that's about it. Thank you once again, Dr. Pete. Thank you to all the viewers. We really appreciate you, even for those who get to watch this after we've recorded it. Thank you for watching. Give us some feedback, share it with your friends. And yeah, that's about it. Remember to always be in the moment and use everything that you can in a good way. Don't let them use you. As says Dr. Pete. And yeah, this has been Now Tell Us. I have been your host, Anthony Mirore, and together with our wonderful guest, Dr. Pete Economou. Until next time, bye for now. Bye.